Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today, and welcome to today's panel discussion titled The Past and Future Office. My name is Valentina Doncevic from Design Studio Valternative, and on behalf of Paperspace Asia, I'm thrilled to be a host today. Today's panel discussion is centered around the evolution of the office and what it means to build the office of the future. Also, I'd love to say a great thank you to our online audience who are joining us today. Over 180 attendees have signed up for today's session. This is the third of 4 sessions we have put together in conjunction with our exhibition, which is taking place right now. It's called Office Disrupted. You can find it at level 1 at National Design Center if you haven't done so already. It's running through to 13th of May this year. Also, I'd love to say a big thank you to our main sponsors, Wilcan, Steelcase, Exto, and Lux Space. This exhibition and the panel discussions have been put together by Paperspace Asia with support of Design Singapore Council. And they are also part of the National Design Center's Casting Hope program lined up for April and May this year. Now, finally, I'm very, very thrilled to introduce to you our panelists for today. We're very, very pleased to have with us Aalok Agrawal. He's Senior Vice President of P&G Consumer Healthcare in Asia Pacific, Middle East and Africa. A seasoned leader with 23 years of experience in the consumer goods and consumer healthcare industry with P&G. Aalok's diverse experiences include regional CMO for Europe Healthcare in the PGT joint venture in Geneva, Global Head of Marketing for Vicks in the US, and Head of Marketing for Asia for baby care and healthcare categories in Singapore. Next, we're privileged to have with us Chris Moore, Head of Corporate for APAC at Aalok and Overy. Chris has been based in Singapore for more than 20 years and has deep experience in the region. Globally organized by clients and experts for being a leader in the legal industry, Chris was also the firm's managing partner for the past 8 years, and in that time oversaw the growth of the office into the largest and most profitable of the A&O offices in Asia, and one of the highest rated in the international law firms in Singapore. Our third panelist is Shao, Southeast Asia Head of Group Corporate Services at UBS. She has accumulated over 15 years of experience in managing real estate, workplace, and facilities across APAC. One of her most recent projects is the new UBS office located right here in Singapore at 9 Penang Road. Spanning 381,000 square feet across 8 levels, this flagship office has been fit out with innovative future workplace concepts and customized health and well-being facilities. Today's panel discussion will be moderated by our very own Narita Chia, co-founder and director of Paperspace Asia. Narita's experience over the past 20 years has focused on client engagements with coordinated teams to deliver complex projects around Southeast Asia. With her vast experience in workplace, strategy, design, and change management services, she is skilled in managing strategic dialogues to ensure seamless end-to-end project delivery. I will now hand it over to Narita to kick off today's session. Please help me welcome our panelists for today.
Thank you, Valentina. A big welcome to everyone in the room today. It's lovely to have you and to all audiences online. Big thanks to Aalok, Chris, and Shao for being here. It was quite difficult to get all of them at the same time, so we're very, very privileged. To start off today's session, we wanted to just kind of really talk around the fundamental shifts that happen in the evolution of the office throughout history. And the main force behind this has been fundamental shifts in the work attitude. And to start off the conversation, I'd like to invite Aalok to kind of help us walk through some thoughts around what you would say are the biggest shifts we have seen towards the office, the workplace in the past decade.
Yeah. So it's great to be here, and thanks for inviting me. I would say the biggest shift has been the entry of Gen Z and, of course, millennials into the workplace and the expectations that they have. I think their expectations are much more focused on inclusiveness, on whether it's sustainability, on collaboration, connections, and frankly, a much more fun working environment. So if you go to, of course, the tech companies kind of led the way here. Many of the tech companies sort of feel more like college campuses than they do like workplaces. But equally, I think many organizations, including P&G, we've sort of transformed to these open offices where there's less hierarchy, there's more connection, and more fluid conversations between and connections between people. So I think that's probably the single biggest shift that's happened. Obviously, also with the advent of technology that enables remote connections, but I would say over the last decade, this has probably been the single biggest shift.
Right. And in the legal industry, Chris, in what ways has the purpose or function of the office evolved from the past? Has it?
I think it has. I mean, I think the law firm profession is probably, the slowest of many to move when it comes to change. We're naturally risk-averse people. There was a time when the only way you could get a managing partner to come to a meeting was to put open plan on the agenda. So we've grown up in an environment where everybody's had their own office, and that's part of the culture of a law firm. And that definitely has changed over the last 10, 15 years. I mean, certainly our London office became almost like an environment to live in because people were spending so much time in the office. The office had to evolve into providing a whole range of different services, both to our clients and our people, whether that was the catering, your laundry, places to sleep. It became almost like a place you could live. I don't think we've gone quite that far in Singapore, but it has changed. And I agree that, our workforce and our clients now expect different things from us as an institution. They expect us to look after our people in a different way. Our people expect to be treated in a different way. The well-being is important. The interconnection, the environment in which but we've still, if you like, retained some of the old habits of law firms, which is single offices or double offices, and we've tried to create that sort of open environment. I'm not quite sure we're there yet.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that.
This would be a chance to change things.
Absolutely. So Shao, financial institutions have evolved significantly in the past 15 years even. We've seen the digitalization in banks like DBS, and obviously the recent headquarter project for UBS here in Singapore. Tell us a little bit more about what has changed from the past and what brought you to this project.
Well, the flagship building in Singapore, actually, I would say is a testament of the change within UBS that we have been, evolving. Culturally, we're definitely also moving towards a more open space plan, just like what Aalok has shared in P&G, with the injection of the newer generation employees. But at the same time, also, we were driven by a need for greater collaboration and, engagement. So with that in mind, certainly, when we designed the new workspace, it was really, trying to make sure that we have elements that could propel us into the next decade and be sustainable.
Right. And obviously, in talking about the office, there's been a lot of question. I think we've moved past the conversation of, is the office dead? I think there's a general recognition that it's here to stay. I think the question to you, Aalok, is, what shapes the office? And then conversely, can the office shape a person? What is its role in shaping culture? There's been a lot of, talk around that. Really, is that a sense of place where that will continue to breed culture?
Yeah. So, we used to live I think many of us used to live by work hard, play hard. And now we live by work hard, work harder, and maybe eat a little bit more, right? So this is something that I think is, we've lost play, I think, through the last 1 year, the interconnectedness, the humor. I mean, when was the last time you try and crack a joke on Teams? I mean, you can't see anybody laugh, or you can't hear anyone laugh. So there's all of those aspects of the human interaction, I think, that have been diminished. We've done the work. The results are there. I mean, everyone, companies are doing generally, I would say, well. But in the process, I think the human connection, the relationships, the collaboration, the creativity, I think there's an opportunity to bring that back together with the sense of play. And the office environment and the future of the office, I think, should really focus on that, or needs to focus on that. And that's what we're trying to get right now.
Right. And it is interesting that you talk about sense of play. We've heard about, the social aspect, the social capital, collaboration, but we've never quite heard play. And I want to kind of circle back on that a bit later. And just staying with you, Aalok, you've had rich experiences across Asia and globally. And what are your observations on how office design shapes the way businesses is facilitated and conducted?
Sure. So what I've seen in the different offices that I've worked in, I think, is the shared and collaborative spaces where those were designed seamlessly and integrated and made very accessible. You facilitated a lot more collaboration, a lot more creative thinking. And of course, P&G, the way we work, we're largely in teams, that really was facilitated. So in Geneva, the cafe was just a buzzing sort of place where people came together and connected. And I think more and more of that will need to come about in order to create that sense of connectedness and collaboration in the future.
And the need to obviously respect the different cultures and how people behave will still be something that's going to be a key in differentiating those experiences. Would you agree?
Yes. I mean, people will always have different expectations, right? But I think some people will naturally flow towards certain spaces. But equally, I mean, in that office environment, there was as many sleep pods as there were, kind of collaborative spaces as well. So I think you can hopefully offer a variety of different experiences to people.
Right.
But maybe just to go to your point, if I may, that can the office create or change a person or a culture? I mean, I think our office environment does a number of different things. It's a place where you do your work, you collaborate, you do your training, you do your execution. It's a front of house for clients. There are back office things. It's just very fluid environment, and each thing has to be different. And it also kind of reflects the brand and the culture that you're trying to establish as a firm. That's an important part of what the office did. And I remember going to Diageo's office here, which was incredible. For me, it was it was a very open plan. There's cafes, there's a bar, and it was wonderful. And then I thought, would that work for Allen & Overy? It's a very different type of brand. It's a very different experience. We always sort of tread that tightrope between making our front of house look prestigious enough to attract the clients or to impress the clients without being too expensive, because then they start questioning whether they're paying too much. And there's all these things to take into account. And that's what I've seen over the years, how that has changed for us in the terms of how we do that. It reflects something about who you project to your clients and to your people. And I think the real shift is how is that going to change because of what's happened in the last 12 months? I think everything's up for grabs.
Absolutely. So let's just stay with you, Chris, on space and design. So you've recognized, I think along with everyone here in the room, that the next gen workforce is emerging from the pandemic in a greater appetite for change, which really was probably already there to begin with. So what are the major changes you have adopted in your office recently in response to this?
Yeah, I'm not sure this is just about the next gen. I think this is about what's happened in the last 12 months. I mean, we were talking before, we've all been kitted up to work remotely, and some of us have been traveling and doing our jobs remotely because we travel. We'd spent a long time trying to introduce flexible working with our workforce because the next generation Z, whatever it was, millennials, I don't know the terms, they were demanding this, or at least we thought they were, but no one was taking it up. And I think when we've looked at that, one of the aspects of that was around trust. You know, you had all this stuff, you had all the kit, but no one was doing it because I think partners thought that if their people weren't physically in the environment, they weren't doing their job, probably they may be slacking a bit, or they weren't part of the team, or they weren't available. And I think equally the associates and the others who were not buying into that because they didn't want to be outside the team, and they wanted their partners to see that they were in a job. What has changed in the last 12 months is we've shown to ourselves that we can do this work remotely. We can trust our associates to go off and do their job and not slack around. And the associates can see that it doesn't matter where they are. And I think fundamentally that's what's changed for us in the last 12 months. And now we're struggling, I think, with how to get the balance right between what we've achieved with that and yet to bring people back into a physical environment for all the reasons you suggested, which is that it has to be there. You can't grow and develop and create that culture when you're sitting in front of a computer. But we've shown we can work remotely. And to me, that's the big shift, that there's an opportunity here for us to do things differently. And because we've shown we can do it and we have the trust that now creates the platform for us to move on.
Right. I want to quote this recent article that came out from Bill Winters, the CEO of Standard Chartered. And he said, the events of the last year have brought into sharp focus the fact that the concept of dedicated offices is incompatible with the emergent need for flexibility, collaboration, and space efficiency. So I want to turn that same question back to you, Chris, and what are your thoughts around what Bill said?
I think he's right. I think he's absolutely right. The challenge for us is whether we'll take the leap of faith that this opportunity has given us. And I've got my new managing partner over there, so I better be careful what I say. But I think there is an opportunity. Our people demand this now. You mentioned sustainability. We've set a net zero carbon target. And a key factor in a law firm for that is reducing the footprint and being more sensible about how we use our space. Our talent pool is demanding collaboration and this interactive environment. So I think there is I think he's absolutely right. It's game on. I think everything's up for grabs here. I worry that we as a profession will still be glacial about it. And I think the challenge for our new team will be to sort of nudge people a bit harder. Right. But I think he's right.
Well, I think, Shao, you would have completed a landmark project here in the heart of Singapore, the Orchard Road Belt, a very significant landmark project that have put UBS as the kind of gold mark standard for what a consolidated work environment looks like. Tell us a little bit around your experience with what were some of the key features from a space and design aspect that was brought into this project.
So when we first looked at the entire strategy of UBS about 4 years back, the goal was to consolidate and bring all teams back together, because at that point in time, we were spread across 4 different buildings. We even had a university campus right in the heart of Bukit Timah in a heritage building called the Command House. And so, traveling time, the efficiency of work, etc., was getting a little bit in the way of engagement. So, the opportunity arose such that we were able to consolidate 3 buildings into one. And in the new place, at that point in time, we definitely were looking towards the future. What would our future workforce look for and hanker after in our workspace? So we've got in-house cafe, we've got in-house medical clinic, we've got an in-house gym. We have a recreation room with a pool table and even, cable TV, and all this with that in mind. And so interestingly, with COVID, we actually found that all the collaboration space that we've built, the open floor plans actually worked very much in our favor, especially with all the restrictions on safe distancing, etc. We were able to very quickly wing it and still make sure that whilst people are coming back, they can still use the space flexibly and effectively. So we really didn't, we were quite lucky. We were quite forward thinking, and so we didn't have to change too much. Yeah, it's more of behavior.
Right. So in that regard, the pandemic kind of like enforced these ideas and kind of cemented it with the business.
Yes.
So could you share with us, Shao, what that process looked like in trying to get people to embrace, people love the gyms and the wellness and all that, but we know that the Singapore real estate doesn't have a plus equal sum. How did you get the business, all 4,000 people to say, this is the vision of what we want to be in the future?
It is a process and it is a journey, and it's an evolving one, I have to admit. But right from get-go, we knew that whilst the real estate decision was a key element to it, it's more about the culture that we want to imbibe, inculcate into the new workspace moving forward. And so we actually started off with a co-creation process whereby, in the past, typical office would have taken, I don't know, maybe 6 to 9 months just to even get a basic sign off. And, along the way, there could be loads of different opinions about how the workspace should be. But in this particular project, because we were so clear on our vision, that, through a co-creation process by involving up to about 80 to 100 stakeholders across the firm, all rank and file, from senior management all the way down to junior associates or staff, we were able to actually get their inputs earlier on, and thereby start the education process. Because I think pretty much like the law firm, we do have some departments that are still operating in a very traditional mindset, with offices, information confidentiality, compliance, reasons, regulatory enforcements, etc. That doesn't really allow us to openly collaborate and work in a very open workspace. But with this co-creation process, it really made all the teams understand that they actually have a lot more in common, thereby breaking down the barrier and be able to use it more flexibly. So the change management process at the get-go actually started from the design phase. It couldn't happen right at the end because by then it'll be too late. It has to start at the very beginning by involving everyone, and thereby again also giving them a little bit more sense of ownership as they start to occupy it.
It's almost
we went through a very similar process actually, and it was interesting we tried to get stakeholder involvement at all levels in the redesign. And my experience of that is we ended up with a bit of a mixed bag because you're trying to cater for everybody. So we ended up with lots of open collaborative spaces. It looked fantastic. The coffee machines and baristas and all of this stuff going on. And yet we've still got around the edges the old offices, everyone in their old offices. So you look often at our collaborative space and there's no one using it because everyone's still in their old office. So I wonder if you as you suggest, you do that stakeholder build up, but you're going to have to also lead people to change. Otherwise you end up with these sort of slight compromises. Again, lawyers are rubbish at this sort of thing. I think we take a long time to move forward, but that would be the lesson we learned from it, which is you've got to be careful of the halfway house. Otherwise you end up with something that's not quite right.
Right.
Yeah.
So Shao, tell us a little, this co-creation process almost kind of sounds like a bit of a design thinking process that you kind of got the business to come along the journey with you.
Yes.
And it sounds a little bit like in the past, you would have done it for 20 years and you say, this is how it should be done. It's the best thing since sliced bread, as opposed to taking them on the journey of self-discovery, so to speak, bringing traders whose day job is to trade, and now they get a sense of, if I make this choice, what do I get back? And then maybe when there's a collective view about, what you take away and what we get back collectively, did you see that process as something that you would do all over again? I can't imagine it was an easy one.
It was not easy, but we would definitely do the same all over again. It was very successful. And truth be told, yes, we did start it off with a mixed bag, but within 3 days, you won't believe the type of, the actual sense of camaraderie that was actually built between departments that would never usually have come together and said, actually, we do need to have this space where we can just sit down, discuss about this transaction and that credit rating and so on, not necessarily always in a meeting room. That actually bode very well for us. Even the traders, those who are, typically stuck behind their, 6 screens, 8 screens platform, even they were fully engaged and say, you know what, I want to have that social space rather than that, stuffy corner little meeting room and talk about that confidential transaction. I want to be able to shout, but also at the same time, hey, have a more relaxed and fun environment, to talk about trades even, although within a very, a larger macro environment. So no, we will definitely do it again. And if anything, I would say that the Singapore project is the epitome of how we would like to run it. And in UBS, this is even, we're even taking it beyond UBS and very likely implementing very similar type of model whenever we want to build an office, in the region or globally.
Fantastic. That's a very different process. I haven't quite heard one like that in a while, apart from the tech firms that we've worked with. So
it's a lot of sweat and blood, no tears, but a lot of grit. But yes, but we managed to get there.
And do you think that would have made a big difference even in the continuity of the journey to the completion of the project? I think when you sort of own it from the start, I'm guessing then the journey to the completion is kind of not just sort of saddled by the real estate FM team, then much more belonging to the business?
Absolutely. And that's why I mentioned earlier, it has to start at the beginning of the process, because that's where you build the sense of belonging and sense of identity. And Chris mentioned earlier on about, the branding and the image of the firm being attached to how we build the office. Well, if you ever do come post-COVID restrictions, you'll see that it looks expensive, but we've got very good negotiators on the procurement side. But it's value for money, and it is our brand, both front and back. So the IT teams are as proud to work in that space as are our bankers and traders and asset managers.
Fantastic. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit around human connections. Aalok, you talked a little bit around play earlier, and in sort of the impacts of the pandemic. What returns to work or return to office strategies have you been developing with your teams in building trust and resilience? We've heard from a numerous range of clients, they're seeing only an uptake of between 20% to a maximum of only 50% of their employees returning to the office. What steps are you taking to do that?
Yeah, so firstly, I'll say, P&G's seen a large number of our employees all within the government guidelines come back. So we've actually not had to coax people as much, and people have naturally come back. It's also the nature of our environment, the team-based strategies that we work with, and frankly, the relationships that we have with each other. That said, I think we are working to try and build a number of different pilots. And the pilots are basically, because again, we don't claim to know exactly where things are going to head, but we'll learn our way through it. But the pilots are very focused on, things like jobs to be done, right? So if you if you work in a team-based environment, if you need sort of that whiteboard marker and the creativity and the brainstorming, the teams will kind of come in and be in the office that day and work. On other days when they need to do analysis and be at home, they'll work individually. And so it's about giving flexibility to our people, giving them the choice but also focused on making sure the work gets done. So it's focused on how we work rather than where we work. But I think it involves, as Chris mentioned, a big element of trust, which we have seen play out. Our people have been amazing in the last 1 year in delivering and making things happen despite working remotely. And so there's no doubt that, as we move forward as well, that same level of trust is going to stay with respect to how people decide when they want to come in, when they want to work from home. I mean, we had situations where salespeople would be out, they'll be meeting a customer, and maybe it's 3 or 4 p.m., but instead of going home, they would come back to the office. I mean, that kind of stuff doesn't make any sense anymore. It's kind of like, why would you do that? Just go home and be with your family instead of crisscrossing the entire city.
Right.
So again, I think we're working towards a number of these pilots that will help us get that team-based focused on the jobs to be done, and then playing those out. We're also focused very much on personal wellness. So making sure, I think we all have had the experience of just going from one call to another without even time for a bio break. And so making sure that we can, we're creating no meeting zones, extended lunch breaks. So just other aspects of wellness that make sure that our people are well taken care of.
So that's really interesting. And it sounds like you've got a very disciplined, well-educated team of knowing when to be in the office and when to be from home. I think a lot of organizations are still kind of trying to get their arms around that, right? To have a common way of expectations. I think that's going to be really important.
Yeah, and if I can mention, I think P&G is a bit unique in the sense that we've been in a work from home and open office situation since 2001 in Singapore. So when I first moved here, we were given a work from home allowance. We're asked to work from home once a week. We set up our Wi-Fi and printer and study desk, etc. All offices were open. So we've been on this long journey where we've all sort of, in a sense, mastered this way of working. So now if you want to be flexible and do 2 or 3 days a week from home, it isn't actually making, it's not a huge disruption for us. And so not every organization is down that far, but for us, it's second nature right now.
So basically it's 20 years in the making of this way of working, essentially, 2 decades.
Indeed. It really has been. And I think people sort of think of it as just normal. Nobody questioned where you work from on a given day. Anyway.
Right. And that's probably not representative of most organizations out there.
Indeed.
So let's kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about this camaraderie. And we're going into this new term called the Fidget World, where half are in the room, half are not in the room. And then we end up, if we're in the room, all our laptops are on, or there's distance bias. So there is this frustration that's coming out in this more and more Fidget World. Could you share a little bit around your thoughts around technology and how that plays a part? Can it really bridge the gap?
So what we've seen, as you pointed out, I think inclusiveness is a really important element to make sure that our technology enables inclusiveness of participation. So again, I'm sure we've all experienced this, but when you're online, it's really hard to interrupt people and sort of, you feel like you're talking over somebody, you're being rude. And so, it's like people who are naturally, let's say, just more amenable to speaking up, they thrived in this environment. But, some of the quieter people, I think, struggle to stand out. And again, so as a leader and making sure that we've got that very inclusive environment, pausing to make sure there's participation of people, making sure, of course, technology is upgraded. We were talking about, in this hybrid work from home, work from office environment where not everybody's online or not everybody's in the office. How do you even enable technology that allows, seamless experience? In fact, now, many cases, we've started switching on our cameras individually on the laptops to make sure that each individual person can be seen in the office. So again, there's a lot of focus on on really upgrading technology to enable this inclusiveness and participation.
Right. And do you think that technology will ever replace those water cooler, serendipitous conversations, the conversations that happen before the meeting, after the meeting, where decisions are actually made then? Chris, what do you think about that?
No, absolutely not. And I think we've, again, even in 12 months, we've been on a journey around that because, the work from home thing was quite exciting to begin with. Everybody thought, this is all right. Yeah, I can do this, and I can have a cup of tea, I can sit in my shorts, I can have a swim. You can do whatever you like. No one cares, as long as you do the job. But what we've learned over the year, apart from the fatigue, I think that's one thing, but people are missing the bit that made the job more fun. And so we all work hard, we do our job for our clients and our colleagues. But there are always moments where you suddenly think, well, that's why I'm doing this job. It'll be a sort of, sometimes it's a physical, it's a pat on the back, or it's a joke, or you're sitting there late at night in a meeting and things have gone slightly awry and you're waiting for something to happen and you start talking about the football, or this person's wife is complaining because he's not at home. You say, my wife's the same, and it makes things very human. People are not getting the learning experience in the same way. They're not watching how other people interact. And that was a big, we still say our juniors sit with our senior lawyers because that's how they learn. They learn, it's almost like an apprenticeship. And that's gone when you're online. All of that interaction has gone. So I think our challenge now is to make this hybrid world work, but to bring people back into that physical environment, because I think they want it. I think some of them are not yet sure why, or haven't really, they need to be encouraged that this is important. But at the same time, we've got to recognize that people want this fluid environment, and that's going to be a real challenge for people. We spend all of our time trying to, because one of the problems is you get people to come back, but if not everybody's coming back, they're sitting there in their office at work on their own, so they might as well be at home. So you've got to start thinking about, as you perhaps have been doing longer than us, something that we didn't have to do before is how do we get people to come back together so that they're getting that experience? And that requires a whole new way of thinking for us.
Right.
So,
and maybe mandating that to a certain degree with the right principles. To Aalok's point is kind of fast tracking that 21 years that P&G have adopted.
Yeah, I've struggled with mandating because I don't think lawyers listen to authority, certainly not to their bosses. So I think our approach is always one of persuasion and collective buy-in and consultation. And we've seen the JP Morgan guys come out and say everything will be back to normal. I think if we said that to our lawyers, they'd all just run a mile. So I think it's going to be a process of trial and error, bringing people back, encouragement, thinking creatively about how to do it, and creating the space at work where they're happy to come back and there's other people there.
So to tell us a little bit about that space, right? We know that the cultural aspect, the experience that we want to get, and yet I think in most offices that we go back to, it's kind of essentially 70% of it is filled with that's really was built to do individual task work, and yet that's the singular highest thing that employees have pulled to be able to do remotely. How do you see that sort of space shift happening? It's a tough one.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, even this month we're struggling with because you can't have two people in the same room, and all of our offices are for two people, and so we're trying to work out how you. And we then say, well, look, let's move people away from their own office with the pictures of the family on the desk and all the tissues in the drawer, and trying. And the partners are like, no, we can't possibly have that. I've got to have my own space. And so you're going to have to push space and change. I mean, we can't rip up the internal environment now as much as perhaps I would like to. I'm not sure whether Tim would want to when he's trying to work through this next month. But you're going to have to think a little bit around it. We looked at trying to put workstations in the collaborative environment, and for various reasons that didn't work. But yeah, we're new to some of this. We're going to have to think hard.
So Charmaine, UBS had gone from a massive shift from what was done in the past, and we like to see the new iconic building as an example of what has been achieved and what change looks like in addressing new behaviors, new needs. And what are some of these elements that you say are key and here to stay?
There are actually quite a number of elements. So there are two aspects to it, right? That's the mental and wellness of staff, and also the use of space, because we've already clearly invested in quite a bit into the building. The engagement, collaboration, sustainability, all these are elements that will continue to stay for sure. And along the way, it's about striking a balance between how do we use the space to meet the demands and the mandate that we've actually set out. The list actually, it's quite long, yeah.
So I think what you said was that I think what is going to be non-negotiables moving forward would be engagement, agility, sustainability, and experience.
Yes.
And to that point, Aalok, what do you think are the core values that propel the office of the future?
Yeah, so I think we're moving from sort of, again, and something everyone talked about, individual sort of workstations to more connection, collaboration, creative spaces, right? I think that's going to be that was already happening, and I think like everything else, COVID has accelerated that process as well. So I think as we're looking at future design choices, that's going to be a big part of it. The second aspect, I think, is we talked, bringing the play back, bringing that element of human interaction and connectedness. The third one, I think, increasingly, and we touched on this, is sustainability, which I think is it's becoming increasingly important. It may be in many different ways, of course, in the office design itself, but also in, for example, commuting times and commuting distances. I mean, I think our mega cities were all designed for one central office with, everybody kind of traveling in. And if you ask me, the number one reason why people don't want to come back is commuting. I mean, why would I spend an hour going, coming when I can, do my work from home? I think there are a number of different sort of pilots that we're looking at in that space as well. Is there an opportunity for a satellite office? All of those things which can enable just a different way of reducing the footprint that we have on sustainability, while also enabling the connections and the play.
Right. So we're really trying to do a lot of things here in the moving forward, right? We're trying to reduce carbon footprint, most likely going to try to reduce real estate footprint, but then activate a lot more activities in the work environment, kind of try to summing that up.
Yeah, I think it'll be a different kind of activity. So going forward is, we're trying to create more of those spaces that allow for interaction, design. And again, we're in the process of starting this off. I think, which, we have redesigned one floor, as I was mentioning to you earlier. Of course, like everybody else, there's a pool table, there's the ice cream bar, there's all of the other stuff that sort of create. But honestly, that was even conceptualized before COVID and just executed through that period. There's now potentially other design thinking that's coming forward that'll be in the space.
Right.
And I recognize a lot of what you say. I sit on a global management call every week, and we've got pilots going on all around the world. Commuting is a big issue for some centers. New York and London, it's the primary factor. Singapore, I don't think that is the same. We are looking at multiple, I think fundamentally, if you like, philosophically, what will change is our world was the office. Our working world started and kind of finished with the office, and then you adapted the office to do all the things you want to. I think the office is now going to be part of the working world, not necessarily kind of like the center of everything we start with. And that's a big cultural change, certainly for our environment. But I think it will be different in different places. Actually, I think we're learning from our own internal experiences that what works for Amsterdam will be very different for London or New York or
Or Japan.
So yeah.
Yes.
So
Or
again,
And you're right, these are all decentralized sort of solutions
Yeah.
that we need. There's no one size fits all here.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I think that one size fits all becomes even more exacerbated now as naturally the pandemic has almost made us quite nationalistic in the way we look at things. Not obviously being able to leave this beautiful island of ours for more than a year now. So, I think to a lot of, people who have come here today, there's been a lot of conversations, surveys, theories, research, hypotheses about if the behavior patterns have changed of the people, the work environment, the office has to play a very different role. And so it also needs to respond to that. But there's a general inertia or apprehension perhaps in applying the solutions. And I'd like to just kind of open it up, and what would you say would be some immediate steps you would take to realize the optimal office, and obviously being very cautious that the financial scrutiny and responsibility in economic times like now is going to be looked at with as a magnifying glass.
Well, maybe I'll start on that. I think you're right. I think there is a sort of inertia. I mean, we have conversations around this, and everyone's going, well, actually, this is just a unique situation, and it will go back to normal. One of the big factors for us was travel. We were always traveling. At any point in time, I think you helped us with this. Our offices were only 50% occupied because everyone was on the road. And now, of course, that's all changed. And so people are reluctant to do much until they think, well, the new normal is here. So again, I'm looking at Emily there. We spend a lot of time thinking, how can we nudge people forward? Because we don't think it will go back to normal. So there is an inertia built into it. We do lots of things. We used to do an annual survey around employee well-being, satisfaction. I think we're doing this thing now once a month to try and get sense back from our workforce in different parts of the world. How are they coping? What do they want? What do they see the new normal looking like? So you start that process of engagement now. I think the actual physical stuff is going to be a function of your rent, your costs, etc. But we're starting it now.
Right. So I just want to close off the last question as we kind of start to take a lot of Q&As have come through from the people, our audiences online. So from a real estate perspective, Shao, as teams return, what new data points are you collecting to measure success and performance of people and space? Once upon a time, space utilization survey was the kind of badge of how well your real estate is performing. I think we're confident to say that we'll kind of had to chuck that out the window. So what measurements and metrics now do we have to look at?
So there are two elements to that. And, just on your point about the occupancy data, you're absolutely right. In the good old days, that's exactly how we would measure our success from a real estate perspective. Now, is there any opportunity to look at it differently? I think there still is. Not necessarily in terms of the actual desk occupancy, but certainly how well are the social zones now being utilized? I mean, we have gone from closed offices and partitioned workstations to an open workspace with a lot of collaborative areas and social zones, etc. And now with COVID restrictions and the new normal, we're supposed to keep our distance. How well are they going to be used in reality and practically speaking, even after post-COVID? That's still an area that I think it's evolving. I don't think anyone has a straightforward answer yet, but certainly an area that we do want to look into. But so that's a space perspective that we can still definitely grow and evolve with time. The other element, as what Chris has mentioned earlier, is on the staff perspective. And in UBS, actually, there is a lot of emphasis on the mental and the health and well-being of our employees. And so on a bank-wide globally basis, we have conducted surveys. And I think the most recent one had a pretty good outcome. I would say actually above the industry standard globally. And also internally, we will still continue, again, barring COVID restrictions and government advisories, we will still actually conduct programs to encourage the take on of all these wellness programs, to encourage the staff, to stay healthy and remain connected with the rest of the colleagues, whether it's through more casual activities or through work or just by being back in the office. I think that will also, eventually translate into, the future work productivity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I just want to conclude this recent survey that was conducted by Aon's 2021 Global Wellbeing Survey that claims that improvements to employee well-being performance within a company have an impact on customer satisfaction, business performance, and talent strategy. So I think that sort of really ties in with the statement you just made, because I think it's beyond just amenities and facilities. How do you take sort of well-being and wellness beyond a physical space, and how do you create those conversations that need to happen more? So I'm going to shift gears, and there's lots and lots of questions coming through from our participants online. I'm going to take this light-hearted one from Mr. John Ting, and he's asked, any chance of organizing a study tour of the new UBS AG headquarters when the coast is clearer, of course? I'm thinking that's for you, Shao.
It's a difficult question to answer because it is an office environment. So I wouldn't say so much as a study tour, but certainly we will look into it post-COVID to see whether or not it is possible to receive more guests. For the time being, we are quite strict in terms of visitors for contact tracing purpose. I hope you all understand.
I think that's a yes with many, many caveats to that, John Ting. I'm going to take out the next question, and this is a question for Chris. We're talking a lot about building trust between co-workers. Moving forward, as more people return to the office, how are you redesigning, reapproaching the experience for on-screen participation so that employees working remotely don't feel relegated to a lesser connected status? It's a really good question.
It is a good question. I'm not sure I've got an obvious solution. I mean, again, we're learning. As I said, I think people started off thinking, how is this going to work? Then we got it all kitted up, and then, okay, this is quite good fun, and we're okay. And then we realized that people were missing that bit extra. And so a lot of our thinking now is how to recreate. We've done everything with sort of wine and cheese tastings on Zoom with physical, some physical, some not physical, and all sorts of, again, Emily's the star of this, all sorts of great ideas to try and bring back that sort of physical or experience of physical. So I think you do, again, it was a given before because people were in the office, these things happen naturally. Now we're having to stop and think about how we do this. As you pointed out, you can't have a meeting which is partly physical and partly online. It just doesn't work. And you learn from experience that doesn't work. Whether technology will fix that, I don't know. You can't have people coming back to get that experience of being physically together unless there are enough people physically together. So you're going to have to think of ways to facilitate that. So again, I think this is just a different environment for us. We're going to have to think harder about how we do all this stuff, and the physical space will have to encourage that in a way. That's what my point. Now, if people do come back and they're all sat in the office all day, what's the point? Nothing's changed.
Absolutely. So I think at this time, I just also want to open up the floor for audiences who are here with us today. Do you have any questions for any of them? All right, I guess, yes. Maybe you could just introduce yourself and where you're from.
Hi, Aalok. It's Vivek here from Singtel.
Hi.
Hi. So the question is, obviously, P&G has mastered over 2 decades of hybrid working. Do you see a pattern where employees prefer to work from home on Mondays and Fridays? But do you have any policies which sort of mandates not to do that?
Yeah. So firstly, mastered is a strong word. I think we would all say we're still learning and evolving our thinking, but certainly it's something we built some muscle on over a period of time. I think again, for us it makes no difference if people work on from home on Mondays or Fridays. I think that's a little bit of the old prescriptive sort of mindset of thou shalt not work on X day, and we did have it at some point in time, But I think at this point, it's, again, what work needs to be done, where does it need to get done? And then beyond that, it's up to you how to, whether you're in the office, whether you're at home. And so we're trying to be as flexible as possible going forward, because I think what we've clearly seen, I think everyone's seen this, is, we all need to make sure we trust our employees to do the right thing. Yes, there will be people who will take advantage of that, but I think you can't, penalize the 95% for the 5. So we've certainly leapt into that trust and driving towards flexibility and choice.
Thank you. It's very well said. Any other questions?
Hi, this is Dave Maxwell from Credit Suisse. I'm wondering whether any of you have noticed during this period that your clients have a different requirement for the way they meet you, the way you interact with them. Do they expect anything different when they come to your offices?
Yes, and each client has got a different requirement. And certainly when we're implementing the technology rollout to allow people working from home, we all struggled with, do you use Zoom? Do you use Teams? Do you use, everyone's got a different requirement. I know Credit Suisse does one system, and I couldn't work out how to get into it for months on end. I mean, it was incredibly difficult. We were also seeing, the physical return. Some clients were much more aggressive about that, and were saying, well, we're back, so you should be back. And we want to meet physically, so you should meet physically. And of course, we couldn't do that. And so there were some very difficult conversations going on. Certainly with the big financial institutions, the requirements around confidentiality and security are enormous. It's a huge cost to our business, but it's essential if you want to retain those relationships. As soon as people are working from home, simple questions like printers, our policy with clients say you can't print outside the secure office environment. And so all our staff were saying, well, if we're working from home, you must give us a printer. We actually said, we can't do that because that will encourage you to breach the relationship agreements we have with some of our clients. So, and every client was doing it differently, which created a huge challenge for us and a huge challenge in managing the expectations of our own people, because they wanted to replicate the office environment and we literally couldn't do it. So I think it's a very good point. Different clients are going to demand different things, and we're going to have to react to that.
Absolutely. We'll take also more questions from the floor. And while we're waiting for hands to go up, I'm going to ask this really very relevant question. This is from Karen. It is apparent that the offices in different organizations are truly disrupted. There's a common theme of what the millennials or Gen Z expect in the new office setup. But how are you managing the older generations within the organizations? How are they coping? And I'd like to turn it over to you, Aalok, because we started with what's shifting, and you said there's a generation of millennials and Gen Z coming forth.
Yeah. So firstly, I'd also caution against assuming all millennials and Gen Z are the same and they have the same experience and expectations. I think we've had enough people who've also struggle with their physical work environment, right? At home, you may be you may be living with your parents and basically have a small room where you work out of, or you have construction happening nearby. I mean, there's all sorts of environmental things. You basically sit on a desk all day and you don't move at all. So, again, your mobility, the amount of exercise you get, again, is restricted. So I think people have very different expectations and experiences that they're looking for. And as I said, we found at least a lot of the millennials and Gen Z have been willing to come back to the office. I think it's about making sure that it's principle based on the work that needs to get done in the office versus work that can be done at home. And so we're very focused on that. I think in the older generations, frankly, yeah, I mean, people are back within the restrictions of the government. But even there, there's no uniform pattern. Again, depending on your personal situation, family, kids, etc. People are choosing to work from home. So I don't necessarily see this very sharp distinction of only people. All the younger folks are basically working from home, all the older ones in the office. At least I don't know if you have a different experience.
I completely agree with that. And I think one of the flaws in the pre-COVID world is we all kind of assumed all our employees were the same. You know, they all were in the same environment. They all wanted the same things. They all had the same. You move online and then you sort of kind of make the same. And it's exactly as you say. You know, I remember there was a picture of a partner from another big international law firm who posted on Facebook or somewhere his work from home environment in his country estate. And there was a picture of the manor in the background and the children running around the lawn. And he got hammered because, you know, all of his associates were sitting in little flats with, you know, it was an awful situation. The point I'm trying to make is I think we've been trying to create our staff, our teams, our employees are all saying we wanted to be treated as human individuals. We want, you know, you've got to recognize that I've got an aging parent or children or other things to manage. And actually now we've got a bit of an opportunity to do that better because we're not starting with a one size fits all. The trust comes into it, you know, because we've shown we can do it. I think we now can take that further and be a little bit more responsive to the needs of the individual rather than just saying, this is what this category of employees wants or that category of employees want. So I think, again, it creates another opportunity for us.
Right. I'll take another question from the floor. No? All right. Well, there's some really hard questions coming through online, so I'm just going to keep plowing on. So this one is an interesting one and probably reflects what most, you know, general employees feel. And I'll let one of you take this. What can we do to change the mindset of bosses who traditionally feel more comfortable seeing staff physically in the office? Have any of you sent your staff or teams or leaders for courses to reshape their mindsets so that they can accept and learn about new ways of working? This is a really good question, by the way. It's something we should always have in all of our projects. How do we manage mindset change when we're talking about space and don't talk back to us?
If there is a course where you can reshape the mindset, I would love to know what it is. Can I have one, please?
Business opportunity for somebody to maybe set that up.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I should start thinking in a business model of that, if we can figure that one, if only. And I think a follow-up question to that is also interesting. Talking about change management, what is the most effective strategy to convince those who are reluctant to adapt to new office styles? And I think in 21 years that you've been trying to make that shift, Aalok, I mean, I don't think everybody kind of transitions or progresses at the same pace. What then is done at a much broader organization level?
Well, I think at least for us, it starts with role modeling, you know, the behavior. I think if you see that from leadership, I think it'll kind of cascade down, right? So for us, certainly from my team, I would say, you know, never asked anybody, okay, are you coming into the office today? Are you not? You know, what work do you need to get done? I mean, that sort of micromanagement is just really old school, and so again, it comes down to trust and yes, I mean, I personally enjoy working from the office. So I do show up in the office, but and I'm sure this is true for a majority of people in the office, we don't require people to come in and they come in when they need to. But yeah, I think it comes from role modeling as much as possible, the behaviors that we expect from others.
Good point. So focusing more on the behavior aspect is going to be more of a long-term strategy, right? And this is a last question, and I think this is more for you, Shao, from Kulan Kapadia. Could you share your thoughts on real estate optimization and how it will be looked at in the future?
It's a loaded question.
Oh, it is. It is. That's why it's for you.
Real estate optimization actually really comes in, you know, in several aspects, right? But it's a long road, and it's a journey, I have to say, right? Just like how we've built 9PR or 9 Penang Road, with all the good intent that we have learned over the past 10 years, mind you, you know, and put them all into the building. And hoping to actually reach a certain target in terms of utilization, etc. Moving forward, the reality is COVID has changed a lot of behaviors. So I say it's a loaded question because From a very technical perspective, there are very hard and straightforward ways to go about it, to be honest. But at the end of the day, it's still the behavior that needs to match all your methods and methodology and applied sciences or applications in the design of the workspace, right? You have the hardcore data. And as a so-called real estate person, it's always easier to start off with statistics. So you look at the statistics, you understand it, but also at the same time, you really need to understand the human element to that. Just like, you know, whether or not is someone going to come back? Do you really want the management to start asking, are you coming back on this day or that day? And if not, then can I actually, you know, take out those space for other users, you know, to other teams, etc. on those 2 days? It's a long road. So I think first things first, it's really understand how this is evolving, perhaps through more statistics, more understanding, and behavioral change. I think the key word for me is to really persevere through the behavioral change and education process. Just like how we perhaps still need to sometimes convince a new senior manager coming in that, look, you may not have that private office anymore. Or a team who is traditionally always so used to having their own private barrier to know that, hey, actually, your barrier requirement in terms of information is similar to the barrier, to the type of barrier shared by another department. So you don't necessarily need to have two barriers, you know, and start working together. And then you start optimizing the use of space. I mean, this is how we started off anyway. And, you know, maybe in a few years' time, we'll know how well this has genuinely evolved. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think behavioral change is probably one of the hardest things to build, and it has to be a long-term strategy. And I think space is essentially kind of what it is, and it's very often the behaviors that don't match up to that. So I just want to kind of call out for all participants online. If you have any more questions, kind of bring them through. We will be concluding this session very soon. We're going to take one more question here, which was really around technology. It's an interesting one. Does technology hinder culture building in a workplace? I'm trying to kind of, you know, unpack this question. Perhaps the question might be, can technology, I'm sorry, I'm trying to reframe the question, can technology take over the role of culture building in a workplace?
Yeah, so from our experience, I mean, as through this period, you know, as I was mentioning earlier, strong ties got stronger and weak ties got weaker. I mean, you know, to a certain extent, people who had strong relationships, they really sort of thrived. Others needed, you know, more encouragement, support. New employees coming into the organization, we were sort of hiring through the last 1 year. Anybody who came into the team needed to be sort of, you know, included. And so I think technology eventually will play a significant, and is playing a significant role in enabling this inclusiveness. And some of it, you know, we've come a long way, but I think there's still more to be done, especially to manage this kind of blended work from home, work from office environment where some people are in the office, some are not. And to make sure that everybody has an experience which allows them to participate, to speak up, to be heard. And this is, I think, something we continuously sort of striving for. I'm not sure we're there, but hopefully as much as possible in meetings as well, to even pause and look at who all have participated, making sure that others, you know, speak up. So I think it's a journey, but we're at least more conscious of this now.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. We'd like to take maybe a question from the floor. Oh, actually, no, we've got more questions coming through. I think we'll take this as the last question. To what extent does your respective organization openly discuss the workspace and the office environment as a lever for attracting and retaining key talent? That's an interesting one.
That's definitely on top of UPS's agenda.
Right. Yeah. So Shao, why did you take that question?
I mean, yeah, the other two. So no, we do pride ourselves in wanting and aspiring to be the employer, to be a really attractive employer, and given that the financial industry itself is also evolving, and I'm sure most of you would have heard the word fintech a lot, and as banking also evolved into e-banking and digitalization. A lot of times, actually, we are fighting pretty much for the same talents that would, who are working at the big tech companies. And so in order to attract those talents, I would say it's the workspace, not just an office, that could actually be a primary attraction. At least, for us, it's also our branding and image, pretty much like Ellen and Overy and PNG. So no, absolutely, it's key and quite fundamental. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that really answered that question really well. So I'll try to bring this to a close. I think we've heard so many opinions, diverse views about this really sort of, topic that's been on the mind of everyone. So big thanks to our speakers. I think as a summary, I think there were a couple of things that I just wanted to note and maybe kind of have key takeaways. It sounds like the past office was really about shaping the future based on past market trends and data in order to find these design strategies. And then moving forward in the future, it sounds like it's the new behaviors that are going to be driving new design solutions. And if that was the case, then what tools are we then using to respond to that when data was the kind of guiding principle of what we have been used to working with in the past 10 years? I thought three key points that I think all the panel speakers kind of raised, which is really interesting, was the purpose of the Office of the Future will now have to deliver experience. And beyond social capital, perhaps the concept of play, perhaps more play really in the environment is what's going to start to bring back those relationships, which is really quite difficult in a very formal setting. How that's going to play out beyond ice cream bars and fancy coffee baristas, I think it's something that I think we need to start looking at a little bit more deeply. Secondly, I think across all parties, we've heard the concept of well-being. So what does an integrated well-being program now look like for organizations? Perhaps beyond just amenities, what sort of programs, activities are going to be bridged as part of play, wellness, and then work? And I think the last topic, which I think Shao clued in very interestingly enough, is perhaps in shaping the future, a process of design thinking or co-creation that will involve a larger significant number of people within the organization to kind of shape that together is probably what's going to be a higher success rate than what we've seen in the past, which is the person that used to do a particular role determining that, or the person who was pretty much at the top of the organization structure. So I hope I managed to summarize that as succinctly as possible. I want to say big thanks to our speakers. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. It's been incredible.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Narita. Thank you. Wow, you were a wonderful audience. Thank you so much for coming again. And thank you to those online also. So before you go, we'll have a couple of QR codes on the screen. To your right, you can find more information about our lineup at the National Design Center. And to your left, it's a small short survey, if you could complete it before you leave. Thank you so much again.